Welcome back to the In Chamber. I'm your host, Tom Schuman. I have some numbers to share. They're not my numbers, but those of our guest today. And he shared them during his final State of the University address last month. Just a few examples. 308,000, the number of Indiana University degrees awarded during his 14 years as president. 212,000 plus, that's the number of those degrees that were earned by Indiana residents. Nearly $4 billion, that's the amount raised during the university's bicentennial campaign that concluded last September. 589, I find this one really intriguing. That's the number of new degree and certificate programs since 2007. I'm sure some more numbers and their significance will follow. Michael McRobbie, retiring soon as Indiana University president after 14 years. Welcome to the In Chamber.
Thanks, Tom. Nice to see you again. Nice to be here. Although I have to correct you on one thing. I'm retiring from the presidency, not from life.
Absolutely. I have to watch my wording there and make sure that's clear. Well, we'll ask you what some of the next things are for you as we continue the conversation. I cited a lot of numbers there, but let me start off. Let's get your perspective. Which ones are of those or other numbers are kind of most critical, or maybe I should say mean the most to you personally?
Well, I think from my own perspective, and I think, but in particular from the perspective of the state, given we're a public university in Indiana, I think two numbers really stand out. One is over 300,000 degrees awarded. This is 300,000 people who will have degrees that will have the effect of enabling them to earn more than twice as much in their lives as people without degrees. And of course, that both contributes to the economy in terms of the skills and the entrepreneurship that they bring to the economy, and it also contributes to it through the impact of their added earnings over the period of their lifetime in the state. A percentage of those are from out of state, but one of the best determinants of where somebody will settle down from out of state is where they go to college. So that is a contribution to the brain gain for Indiana. So that's number one. Well, I should also mention that of that 300,000, over about 50,000 of those are minority students, that is Hispanic, African American, or Asian American students as well. So that is a major increase in the number of people from those disadvantaged communities who will also have degrees, with all that means for the improvement in their futures as well. And then the second number is not one you listed there, but is the total amount of external research funding brought into the university during that period, which is approaching $8 billion. And that's a big number, but what that means, $8 billion, is thousands of life-changing research projects and programs by thousands of IU faculty members across all of our campuses. The majority of them in the STEM fields, and which includes the life sciences, health sciences, medical sciences as well, and all of which employ not just obviously the faculty members work on it, but many, many others who are engaged in that research as well. So it also has a multiplier effect in terms of the services that are provided. So when you look at that $8 billion figures, not only does it have an impact on the improvement of the lives of people in Indiana, but it also means jobs. It means thousands and thousands of jobs as well in Indiana.
Let me jump to build on that second number that you just mentioned. In 2020, $1 billion in external research and private philanthropy. You combine those two, another huge number. When you came into this position, this role 14 years ago, would you have thought that $1 billion in 1 year was possible?
I probably at 2007, I probably would have thought it was a stretch. I certainly believed that we could increase the number and improve the number considerably, and of course we did. But I also knew that that was the kind of number that we would have to get to move into the top tier, the top third, say, of the top institutions in the Big Ten, which we really are on the verge of doing, or we, by some measures, we have done. I think when we reveal our numbers for this year, we probably will be very close to having achieved that. And I think in terms of the impact that we can have in the state by joining that tier, those kind of numbers were vitally important to achieve, and we've pretty much done that now. And so that represents a considerable improvement over where we were 14 years ago.
So President McRobbie, we're going to go back 14 years ago. In fact, I think it was 14 years ago this month, we did an interview as you were preparing to move into that role. And a couple of things you talked about at that time, as I kind of went back and looked at the story. One was certainly the significance of the regional campuses and having them become more diverse and different from each other. Can you give an example or two of how that's taken place?
Well, I went back and read the interview too, Tom. I was interested in seeing what I said. The great bulk of it, I stand by. But this is one area where frankly, I think for a variety of reasons, I really modified my views, and there are a couple of reasons for this. Not long after I started, or very soon after I started, we hit the recession, and the recession had a big impact on the funding of institutions and the ability of people to be able to go to universities as well, because of the impact on family income during that period. And at the same time, one could start to see the beginning of the demographic issues in the rural areas of Indiana that feed many of our regional campuses. And I think what became clearer was that our goal of institutions that were to diverge and be more differentiated was simply not going to be economically possible or fiscally possible. There simply weren't the resources to enable them to do that, and there weren't there wasn't the student body available really to be able to support that. And what was more important was to given that many of the issues those campuses had were very similar, was to actually get them working collaboratively together. That didn't mean that they all would be cookie cutter institutions and look the same. Far from it. They all had different priorities in their regions, but the critical thing was to start having them thinking of themselves as parts of a whole, the IU regional campuses, and working together collaboratively. And so in order to bring that about, I reinstituted a position that one of my predecessors, John Ryan, held before he became president, which is vice president for the regional campuses, and appointed John Applegate, who's about to take over as the interim provost for the Bloomington campus, appointed John as the vice president for that area, where he and the regional chancellors have done a fabulous job of basically getting those campuses working together, sharing resources, and collaborating and cooperating in ways that they've never done before. And I think that has all been to the great benefit of the institution. So that was an area where I really think our initial thoughts about how we were going to proceed there, in the face of both the emerging facts at the time and of a deeper analysis of how to really make progress, really did change.
Well, it is certainly understandable to make adjustments along from 14 years ago. I recall we had a conversation with John on one of our policy calls that we did with chamber members about just that shortly after he took that role as vice president. Another key thing from 14 years ago, we talked about international opportunities, right, and your background, and I know that's been a focus for you. Talk about how Indiana University has advanced in being so closely associated and tied on the international education scene.
Yeah, well, that's an area where we did definitely stay true to our original ideas there. I don't think the world is obviously a different place in all kinds of ways than it was 14 years ago, but I still think that the fundamentals are the same. That we live in a global context. There's almost certainly there's no area of what we do in the university that isn't but affected by it. But I think it's also true for the economy, and those connections internationally, of course, have become more complicated due to the economic competition with China, but but international literacy and understanding of the world more broadly is still a fundamental important skill that a business person after business person I've spoken to really regards as being very valuable among graduates, and really does prepare them to understand the world better when they go out to work collaboratively, as is much more the style these days, with people from all over the world. My son works for a company in Chicago. He spends most of his time in Zoom conferences with people in India and other parts of the world, and that's the same is true for thousands and thousands of IU graduates out there working at the moment. That's the kind of context in which they work. So, as part of an IU education, educating students more about the world really became a major priority for us. And the best way to do that is have students study abroad. So we set out with a goal of increasing that number. It was around the 20% number when I started, and until the pandemic hit, which unfortunately interfered, we were over a third. By which I mean, at graduation of the graduating class, over a third of the students had studied abroad, and that number had continued to increase every year up until the last year we were able to do it. And I met hundreds of students who studied abroad, and to a person, they will all say it was life-changing, it was transformative for them studying abroad. But there's two sides to that. One is studying abroad, and then of course there's the international student body, which we've attempted to diversify too. But then there's the relationships with the international institutions that support both, and also support the work of our faculty, so many of whom work in an international context as well. And we completely rejuvenated that and engaged in a strict process of identifying which were the relationships that really were important to us, and which were ones that had just have been put in place for courtesy reasons. And we reduced it down to the key international institutions.
Emphasizing those key ones and building those.
Because you can only so much time in the day, so much energy you can put into these, and it's best to focus on the ones that will actually support the goals that we have, and aren't, as I said, just courtesies.
A question about the athletics and the tie into academics. A great football season under Coach Tom Allen. You've got former Hoosier star Mike Woodson back to help rejuvenate the basketball program. But off the court, off the field, talk about the role of athletics and their importance to the overall university.
Well, my wife's a University of Michigan graduate, and as you know, and I kept saying to her during the last season, "Aren't you glad you married the president of a football school?" Point I made to her family, who are all Michigan graduates as well. No, it was a fantastic season last season. Coach Allen's season was one for the ages too. But I think when it comes to athletics, it is extremely important. Obviously, it has a big impact on the way in which many alumni of the university remain engaged with the institution, even though they may end up supporting other parts of the institution. I mean, it's important for those extremely high quality young student athletes, and I always emphasize the student and student athletes. We expect them to graduate, and I think the role, the athletics part of what we've done there is. With a goal of improving both the quality of performances and the spectator experience, we engaged in the master plan for the Bloomington campus for athletics, as well as part of the major master plan, and that was completed just recently for about $250 million, and we've completely overhauled and rejuvenated the whole of the athletics complex in the university and better integrated into the university. But the role of a president there, presidents have to be careful with athletics. You can get too involved in it and it becomes all consuming, and that brings with it its own dangers. But at the same time, if you ignore it, it can end up causing major issues for you. And I've been blessed by having had two superb athletic directors in a row. First, Fred Glass, who brought all of his vast experience, having worked in government and the law, and I think did a wonderful job really turning athletics around. And now his deputy during that whole period, of course, who I work with very closely, Scott Dolson, and Scott athletics has not missed a beat under Scott either. So I mean, IU is, I think, in great shape for in the future as far as athletics is concerned.
Well, I want to ask you about some of the kind of the current, what a lot of people call challenges to higher education, or maybe you view those as opportunities. But a couple of the issues, people talk about affordability, the demographics of fewer students of traditional college age, the universities adapting enough to meet, quick, fast changing needs. What do you place at the top of the list as you kind of look at the overall landscape of what might be a concern or what might be most difficult for higher education to adapt to?
Well, I think a couple of things. Firstly, you raised the question about the demographics. What we're seeing there, and this I think has been predicted, is in the Midwest there is a demographic decline in the number of university ready students in that area, and but the flagship state institutions are not being affected. In fact, I think I foreshadowed this in my State of the University speech. We are, at least at the moment, I mean, these things can always change, we are at least at the moment seeing record numbers of freshman enrollment on the Bloomington campus. And I think Purdue has made similar claims. And where we're going to have challenges in the future is in our regional campuses, and we're clearly aware of that. And that's going to be a major priority of the university going forward, is addressing the issues on the regional campuses that are going to be caused by potential decline in numbers in those areas. I mean, our hope is that we have strategies in place to be able to address those and mitigate the effects of it. But there's no doubt that that's not just us; it's every other state in the Midwest. Institutions like our regional campuses are having the same issue. So we'll see that. The other end of the spectrum, so to speak. There's no doubt anybody who's been to China, who's spent time in universities there, which I have, and seen things functioning at the highest level over there, which I have, will realize just that the billions and billions of dollars that have been poured into research in the university system over there, and they've been quite explicit about their goals for international leadership in areas that have been ever since the Second World War, the unchallenged domain of the American universities, and the Chinese universities tend to challenge that. Now, the obviously, because of the impact of innovation on economics and just general national prosperity, this becomes a very important issue, and so consequently, Congress is at the moment starting the debate on what's called the Endless Frontier Act, which Senator Young is one of the, along with Senator Schumer, one of the two movers in the Senate of that extremely important bill. But this is going to bring $100 billion into scientific research. And I think an infusion of funding like that to support not just tinkering around the edges, but major new quantum leaps in areas such as quantum computing, and other areas. Artificial intelligence, obviously, is another area. I mean, automation of all kinds, the most advanced genetic technologies. I mean, what better proof could one have than the extraordinary scientific innovation that led to the production of effective vaccines against the coronavirus in about a year? That those technologies are vitally important to the future, and they were developed basically by scientists in the United States. But how much longer? I mean, how much longer can that lead last? So I think seeing a major impact of funding into scientific research and research in related areas in the university system, which is the place where the basic research is done in this country. We do a lot of applied research and so on, but it's the basic research that is going to be critical here. I see that as just being sort of vital. And if we're to sustain the trajectory that we're on, if we're to contribute, if we're to have an impact in the state, we need to be part of all that when it happens.
Well, those are excellent points, obviously, about the innovation and research on an international level. When we bring it back to the United States, when we talk about innovation, entrepreneurship, I think, as you're well aware, that's an area the Chamber measures through our Indiana Vision 2025 report card. And we see a lot of anecdotal evidence. We see great things going on in Bloomington and in other areas of the state. But when you look at the state as a whole, Indiana ranks poorly in new business startups or the number of people working at these younger firms. So in your view, what are we doing well in the areas of innovation, entrepreneurship, and what might be a missing ingredient for Indiana?
Well, I do. The state is generous, or at least I think funds at a reasonable level. Higher education broadly. Certainly K-12 education and so on. But there hasn't been for a long time any major state investment in some new innovative direction forward. It's interesting, when I was looking back at this interview, the interview we did 14 years ago, Tom, you were also going to speak to President Cordova. And I remember President Cordova and I went to the assembly, first time ever, the two presidents of IU and Purdue went in there to make the case for a life sciences initiative, for which we got very good support. But then unfortunately, that was a session at which the recession pretty much started to really bite. And so we ended up getting just a very small amount of money as opposed to the very substantial amount. And I just think of, had that been, my recollection was it was $40 million a year. Had that amount been funded to go into life sciences research of the kind that President Cordova and I put forward at the time, I think the impact of that would have been very, very substantial, and you would have been able to see that today. So one-off projects and so on, they can have a big impact, but it's going to be sustained funding for initiatives that I think are going to be part of the answer. It's not the total answer, far from it, but it's going to be part of the answer. And I think, compared to where things were, when I started, I think things have definitely improved. I mean, entrepreneurship, I think, is much more accepted. The whole culture of the startup culture is now something that is people are enthusiastic about and so on. But at the same time, although there are many positive signs and a lot of positive developments, I don't think we've quite reached that sort of major sort of takeoff level yet, as some other places have.
Yeah, as I said, and getting it throughout the entire state seems to be one of the challenges. We look at Indiana, there's a lot of rural land and rural communities out there where this probably is just a little bit more difficult without all the resources nearby.
Yeah, one has to leverage off the strengths that we have in the state, and they're considerable too.
Let's move away from some of the important issues we've been discussing and talk about. And you kind of gave hint to it, the role of a university president: hectic, never-ending cycle, meetings, fundraising, events, different things. But beyond that, in those moments when you kind of the calm or relaxing moments, what are some of your favorite activities that allowed you to kind of take a deep breath and reaffirm what you really enjoy about this job you've had for the last 14 years?
Well, it's some people talk about work-life balances, but my work is to a large degree my life, and I don't apologize for it. In fact, I enjoy what I do, and I enjoy spending a great bulk of my time focused on the university and its issues and how to make the place better. But that involves things like the cultural side of all the arts and humanities and cultural side of the institution. Bloomington and the Bloomington campus is richly blessed with fabulous institutions, a lot of which I'm able to play a role in getting renovated during my period. The Eskenazi Art Museum, the Lilly Library, we'll do a dedication next month, a rededication of the Lilly Library. It will be, believe you me, it is going to be fantastic. The renovation of that magnificent gem at the university's crown, and then a number of other new reconfigured museums on the campus too. And then you've got the glories of the School of Music and our theatre department. I mean, culturally, this is a very rich place, and you combine it with the offerings in Indianapolis. And in terms of my own interests and my Florrie's interests, they're more than catered for by what is on offer in both cities. So that certainly is one of the things we enjoy doing. I must say we've always enjoyed travel, but that's been somewhat curtailed in the last 18 months. But we hope that we'll get a chance to start doing some more of that again too.
I was going to say, is what's next? Is travel, or what are some adventures that you and your wife Lori might be doing now that you have going to have a little bit more free time on your hands?
Well, we'll have, at least for a while, we'll have a little bit of time. We don't have anything sort of planned exactly at this point, but we certainly have got some things we're considering doing, and that would involve some travel as well. We've got, between the two of us, we have 6 children, and so they're scattered around the country. So and some new grandchildren. So there's catching up with their lives we'd like to do, but there are some other challenges that I'm hoping I might be able to take on in the future as well.
We've talked about 24 years total in Bloomington or at Indiana University, and many things you've come to love, but what have you missed most about your native Australia?
When you grow up with certain kinds of sports, you can't help but they're sort of embedded in your brain forever. But the beauty of technology that exists today is the sports I follow, as well as obviously following the sports I like to follow here. I can follow the sports back in Australia still just as easily. The timing isn't great, getting up at 2 o'clock to watch cricket or something like that is a little harder. But there's that. I always lived near the sea most of my life, even if I wasn't on it. I mean, I was within an hour or two of the sea, and I've always enjoyed and loved the ocean and stuff. But then, I've kind of missed that being in the heartland. But on the other hand, we spend a bit of time in Florida, so we started to make up for that deficiency in my sort of experience, as it were.
Well, on the sporting side of the equation, I had the chance to travel to Australia 3 years ago with family, and we saw cricket matches in both Melbourne and Sydney.
Oh,
England versus Australia, and my in-laws are from England, so that was a whole new experience and a fascinating experience.
That is one of the strongest rivalries in the world, Australia and England in cricket. I mean, that the whole country, both countries, comes to a sort of standstill for those games there, and they are played with a level of competitiveness that is truly astounding. Yeah, because it's the colonial masters and the old colony. That's the whole ethos of those games there. So it's the sort of the British, the stuck-up British versus the colonial Australians, and say you play to all those stereotypes.
Absolutely. And I know we are looking forward to hopefully a return trip to Australia soon. It's a wonderful time.
Right.
President McRobbie, your successor, Pamela Whitten, will be the 19th president in IU history. I'm sure the two of you have had many conversations, probably with more to come, but can you talk a little bit about some of the key things you have shared with her as she looks to help IU go, in your words, take that next bold step forward?
Yeah, I think what we've talked about is the same as in my last State of the University speech, where I tried to make the case for the fact that so many of the issues and problems that had bedeviled us in the past had been addressed, and we've been able to solve them or come up with ways of addressing them through new resources and so on, and that we were now positioned to take that next leap forward, and that the way to do that was really focusing on the academic quality of the institution. For example, things like the deferred maintenance, $1 billion, we've dealt with it, it's gone, so that's not a problem anymore. And I think as an institution, at the end of the day, the best research is done by high quality faculty, and the best teaching is done by high quality faculty. So you need to be able to be recruiting the best faculty, no matter which campus it is, because they're the ones who attract the students, and by attract, I mean not just enrolling to begin with, but retaining them year after year. And they're the ones who do the research that brings in the money and that does the world-changing innovations. And so that I think is our challenge for the future. And I've shared those views with President-elect Whitten. And I think that's what we need to be, one of the key things we need to be focused on in the future.
Last question, as we prepare to wrap up, we've asked everybody this season of the In Chamber. When you think of it at the end of the day, whether thinking professionally, personally, what has made it a great day for Michael McRobbie? What has given you maybe a special satisfaction at the end of the day?
Do you mean at the end of the period as being president?
Either from the entire period or just kind of on a regular ongoing basis.
Again, I guess I quoted this right at the end of my State of the University speech, but I quoted Miles Brand, a man who hired me in this very office in which I now sit. Miles said, I remember him saying that to be the leader of a great institution is a sort of sacred trust, and what you want to hope for is that at the end of the day, you have maybe changed it for the better. And I'd like to think that, at least in some ways, some modest ways, that I've had a role, along with hundreds and thousands of other people, of changing IU for the better. So that's what I think has given me satisfaction over the last 24 years.
Well, certainly, Michael McRobbie, 14 years as Indiana University president, 24 years at the university as a whole. Thank you for your leadership, everything you've done, and working with your team, and certainly for your time today.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it very much. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. Thank you so much. We know you've enjoyed our conversation with Michael McRobbie as he prepares to retire as Indiana University president, not retiring from life, though. He will continue on in many great ventures going forward, we're sure. Just a couple of Indiana Chamber reminders going forward. Our training events and seminars taking place on a hybrid basis, in-person attendance options as well as virtual. A cybersecurity conference coming up June 23rd, 24th, which we know of special interest to President McRobbie for his longtime work in that area. We encourage you to go to indianachamber.com for details on the 2021 cybersecurity conference. As always, we thank you for listening to the In Chamber We'll be back with our next episode in 2 weeks.